Ever wondered why planes avoid certain parts of the world? It's not just about convenience. There's a fascinating mix of science, safety, and strategy behind it. Some say these regions are cursed, plagued by unexplainable forces that make flying too dangerous. Others claim it's a matter of secrecy, with governments hiding something they don't want the world to see. And then there's the dramatic belief that these areas are simply too risky for even the most advanced aircraft. But how much truth lies in these stories? Could certain parts of the world really be too dangerous to fly over? Or is there a more scientific reason behind these no-go zones? As intriguing as these theories are, the real reasons planes avoid certain areas have nothing to do with myths. They're grounded in the laws of physics, geography, and aviation safety. So stick with us as we dive into the world's most restricted and hazardous airspaces, uncovering the science and strategy that keep pilots away. And hey, while you're here, make sure to like this video and drop a comment if you love unraveling aviation mysteries. Now that we've set the stage, let's explore the real-world dangers that make some regions off-limits to planes. Ready for takeoff? Let's go. They call it the roof of the world, and for good reason. The Tibetan Plateau is one of the most extreme landscapes on Earth, stretching across 2.5 million square kilometers with an average elevation of over 14,800 feet. Home to Mount Everest and some of the highest peaks in the world, this vast, wind-swept expanse is breathtaking. But for pilots, it's an absolute nightmare. Flying over the plateau isn't just a challenge, it's a calculated risk. Thin air at extreme altitudes reduces engine performance, limits lift, and makes maintaining altitude fall more difficult, especially for a heavily loaded aircraft. Turbulence is unpredictable, and rapid shifts in temperature can further complicate flight conditions. And then there's the problem of emergency landings, or rather the lack of them. Unlike other regions where pilots can divert to nearby airport in case of trouble, the Tibetan Plateau offers almost no viable landing sites. A sudden engine failure or cabin depressurization at these heights could force a rapid descent with few options of survival. The 1992 Pakistan International Airlines Flight 268 disaster is a tragic example of just how unforgiving this region can be. Flying near Kathmandu, Nepal, the aircraft was navigating the dangerous airspace around the plateau when altitude confusion and poor visibility led to a fatal miscalculation. The plane descended too low and crashed into the Mahabharat range, killing all 167 people on board. Even the most experienced pilots can struggle with the challenges of high-altitude flight, where minor errors can have catastrophic consequences. The Tibetan Plateau stands as a stark reminder that, despite advances in aviation, nature still sets the ultimate limits. If the Tibetan Plateau is a test of altitude, then the Hindu Kush is a test of survival. While the Tibetan Highlands challenge pilots with thin air and turbulence, the Hindu Kush mountain range adds another layer of danger. Steep peaks, unpredictable weather, and an airspace filled with political tensions. The Hindu Kush is where nature and danger collide. The region is known for sudden turbulence, unpredictable storms, and thin air that can impact aircraft performance. And if something goes wrong, emergency landing options are nearly non-existent. But the danger doesn't stop with the landscape. The Hindu Kush also sits in one of the most politically unstable regions on Earth. Restricted airspace, active military zones, and unregulated flying objects turn this already dangerous airspace into a high-risk gamble. Pilots here don't just have to worry about the terrain, they have to keep an eye out for unexpected aerial threats. And the risks aren't hypothetical. In January 2024, a Moroccan registered aircraft crashed into the Afghanistan's Badakhshan province, deep within the treacherous peaks of the Hindu Kush. The crash site was so remote that rescue efforts were severely hampered by the rugged terrain. At that same month, a Russian charter plane vanished from radar while flying over the region, later discovered wrecked in the mountains. Even major airlines take precautions. Air India, for example, had to modify its aircraft to handle flights over Hindu Kush, adding extra oxygen tanks to compensate for the extreme altitudes. But one mistake, deploying a newer Boeing 777 without these modifications, forced the airline to reroute an entire flight mid-journey, adding time, fuel costs, and logistical challenges. With limited emergency options, unpredictable weather, geopolitical risks, and hidden aerial threats, it's no surprise that commercial airlines go out of their way to avoid the Hindu Kush. In aviation, safety always comes first, and sometimes that means steering clear of danger no matter how long the detour. If the Hindu Kush tests pilots with its war-torn skies and unpredictable airspace, then the Andes Mountains test them with nature's raw power. Here, towering peaks, razor-sharp ridges, and unpredictable weather create one of the most dangerous flight corridors on Earth. At these heights, engines struggle for power, turbulence strikes without warning, and storms can turn a routine flight into a fight for control. Stretching 5,280 miles, 8,500 kilometers, along South America's western edge, the Andes Mountains form one of the longest and most formidable mountain ranges on Earth. Towering peaks, deep valleys, and dramatic elevation changes create a landscape that is both breathtaking and brutally unforgiving. But for aviation, the Andes are a ticking time bomb of turbulence, thin air, and unpredictable storms. Flying over the Andes isn't just about altitude, it's about survival. Many peaks exceed 13,000 feet, with the tallest Aconcagua rising to 22,965 feet, 7,000 meters. The thin air at these heights affects engine performance, reducing thrust and making it harder for wings to generate lift. This means that flying aircraft over the Andes needs higher cruising altitudes, which leaves little room for error in an emergency. But it's not just altitude that makes this region a nightmare for pilots. The Andes generate their own chaotic weather systems, producing sudden turbulence, severe downdrafts, and unexpected storms. The jagged peaks create violent wind patterns, forcing aircraft into intense pockets of turbulence that can send passengers bouncing in their seats, sometimes violently. And the dangers aren't just theoretical. On October 26, 2022, LATAM Airlines Flight LA1325, an Airbus A320, encountered severe turbulence while flying from Santiago, Chile to Asunción, Paraguay. The plane's nose was severely damaged, its front windshield cracked, and the crew was forced to make an emergency landing in Asunción. While no serious injuries were reported, the incident highlighted just how unpredictable the Andes can be for even the most well-prepared flights. To manage these risks, airlines follow strict safety procedures when crossing the Andes. Pilots are trained to anticipate and avoid mountain wave turbulence. Flight routes are carefully planned to reduce exposure to hazardous weather, and Chilean air traffic control requires detailed reports on flight levels, wind conditions, and turbulence levels when crossing the range. Despite these precautions, the Andes remain one of the most challenging and volatile flight paths in the world. The thin air, unpredictable storms, and violent turbulence mean that even routine flights can turn quickly into a test of skill, endurance, and engineering. It's no surprise that pilots and airlines treat this region with the utmost caution, because when the Andes strike, they strike hard. If the Andes challenge pilots with violent turbulence and razor-sharp peaks, then Antarctica pushes aviation to its absolute limits. Here, altitude isn't the problem. It's the isolation, the unpredictable weather, and the sheer brutality of the cold. A land of ice, wind, and silence, Antarctica is as remote as it gets. It's the coldest, driest, and windiest continent on Earth. A place where temperatures can plummet to negative 128 degrees Fahrenheit, negative 89 degrees Celsius, and where the vast frozen landscape stretches endlessly in every direction. But does that mean planes can't fly here? Well, not exactly. While commercial airliners rarely cross Antarctica, research aircraft and specialized equipped planes do operate here regularly, navigating an airspace unlike any other. But make no mistake, flying over Antarctica comes with extreme risks. Unlike most other places in the world, Antarctica has no major airports. There are a few ice and gravel runways, like Troll Airfield and Union Glacier, but these are primarily used for research missions and specialized flights. If a commercial airliner faced an emergency here, diversion options are almost non-existent. That means every flight that ventures into Antarctica airspace must be meticulously planned. Planes crossing these regions often carry extra fuel for a return trip since refueling is nearly impossible, and in case of an emergency, rescue efforts could take days, if not weeks, to reach a stranded aircraft. But fuel and planning aren't the only concerns. Even if a plane reaches its destination safely, it still has to battle an invisible enemy, Antarctica's brutal cold. At first glance, you'd think modern planes are immune to cold. After all, commercial jets routinely fly at negative 65 degrees Fahrenheit, negative 54 degrees Celsius at high altitudes. But Antarctica presents a different kind of challenge. The extreme ground temperatures, unpredictable ice accumulation, and sudden snowstorms can impact takeoffs and landings, and severe winds can create whiteout conditions in minutes. Despite these challenges, Antarctica isn't an aviation graveyard. Specialized aircraft like Boeing 757s, Hercules C-130s, and even a Boeing 787 Dreamliner have successfully landed on Antarctic airstrips. These flights are carefully coordinated, relying on weather forecasts, pre-planned escape routes, and experienced pilots trained for polar conditions. Where aviation in Antarctica is rare, accidents do happen. The most infamous disaster occurred in 1979 when Air New Zealand Flight 901 crashed into Mount Erebus, killing all 257 people on board. The crash was caused by navigational errors and poor visibility, highlighting the lethal consequences of flying in such an extreme environment. Another tragedy struck in 2013 when a Ken Borak Air Twin Otter crashed near Mount Elizabeth, killing all 3 crew members. The extreme terrain, frigid temperatures, and remote location made rescue efforts nearly impossible, reinforcing the dangers of flying in one of the world's most inhospitable places. With few emergency options, unpredictable weather, and extreme isolation, it's no surprise that most commercial airlines avoid flying over Antarctica altogether. But it's not impossible. With careful planning, specialized aircraft, and experienced crews, aviation in Antarctica is slowly expanding. And as technology improves, will we one day see regular flights over this frozen frontier? Or will Antarctica remain the last great aviation challenge? Let us know what you think in the comments. From the endless ice of Antarctica to the frozen tundra of Siberia, aviation in extreme cold is a test of engineering, precision, and survival. But while Antarctica is a place few aircraft dare to go, Siberia is home to some of the coldest regularly operated flight routes on Earth. Covering over 5 million square miles, this vast, nearly uninhabited expanse of frozen wilderness is one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. Winter temperatures routinely plunge below negative 50 degrees Celsius, negative 58 degrees Fahrenheit, and infrastructure is sparse, making any flight through this region a calculated risk. One of the biggest threats to aviation in Siberia is fuel freezing. While jet fuel is designed to withstand extreme cold, even the Russian TS-1 fuel used for flights in Siberia has a freezing point below negative 50 degrees Celsius, negative 58 degrees Fahrenheit. If temperatures drop below that, fuel thickens, flow slows, and engines can be compromised. Airlines operating in Siberia rely on advanced fuel monitoring systems, and pilots have specific procedures to preventing freezing, such as adjusting altitude, increasing speed, or even rerouting the flight to warmer air layers. But sometimes precaution isn't enough. In November 2014, in Igarka, Siberia, passengers on a Katikavia Airlines Tupolev aircraft faced an unbelievable situation. They had to get out and push their own plane. After sitting on the runway for over 24 hours in temperatures plunging to negative 52 degrees Celsius, negative 61 degrees Fahrenheit, the brake pads froze solid, preventing the aircraft from moving. Rather than wait, the 74 passengers, wrapped in heavy winter coats, took matter into their own hands, shoving the plane forward until ground crews could take over. Despite its challenges, Siberia isn't a no-fly zone. Regular flights operate through the region, connecting remote settlements with the rest of Russia. Airports like Yakutsk and Norilsk handle extreme conditions year-round, with heated runways, de-icing facilities, and aircraft designed for the cold. Still, flying over the Siberian tundra is a game of endurance for both pilots and their machines, because when winter tightens its grip, the margin for error disappears. The ITCZ is a vast, dynamic region near the equator, where trade winds from both hemispheres converge, creating towering cumulonimbus clouds, intense thunderstorms, and heavy rainfall. This zone is constantly shifting, depending on seasonal temperature changes, making it one of the most turbulent areas for aviation. For pilots, flying through the ITCZ is like navigating a maze of thunderstorms. Turbulence, lightning strikes, and rapid weather shifts can turn a routine flight into a rough ride. While modern forecasting tools help predict its movements, weather in this region remains highly volatile. One of the most infamous aviation disasters linked to the ITCZ was Air France Flight 447 in 2009. The aircraft en route from Rio de Janeiro to Paris encountered severe weather within the ITCZ over the Atlantic Ocean. A series of tragic events followed. Icing blocked the pilot tubes, causing autopilot to disengage. The flight crew, unable to rely on accurate speed ratings, reacted incorrectly. The aircraft entered an aerodynamic stall and never recovered, crashing into the ocean, claiming all 228 lives on board. This tragic accident remains a chilling reminder of the ITCZ's unpredictable nature and how a perfect storm of environmental and human factors can lead to catastrophe. Even with advanced meteorological tools and modern aircraft, the ITCZ still presents one of the biggest weather-related challenges in aviation. Pilots and airlines take extreme caution, often rerouting flights to avoid its most severe weather pockets. From frozen wastelands to storm-laden skies, aviation faces incredible challenges across the planet. Yet pilots, engineers, and planners continue to adapt, learning to navigate even the harshest conditions. But what about you? Have you ever flown over any of these regions, or experienced the sheer power of nature while on a plane? Turbulence, storms, extreme cold? Share your stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear your experiences. And with that, we wrap up this journey. Thank you for watching, and make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more.